I still clearly remember my heart pounding that night and the crazy look in his eyes when he saw me. Now I can finally tell this story calmly. I'm Iris, a third-year college student at a university in Georgia. I share a small house with my two best friends from freshman year, Nora and Quinn. We lived like three sisters, sharing everything with each other. It all started when Nora suddenly announced she was taking a leave of absence from school to go home for medical treatment. We were all surprised because Nora looked completely healthy. On the day she left, Nora cried a lot. We told Nora to keep in touch and promised to visit her when the semester was over. Since Nora left, the house had become much quieter. That weekend, Quinn went home to visit her family. I was even lonelier being by myself. I was in my room studying for an exam. Around 10 p.m., I heard a noise from the kitchen. At first, I didn't pay attention because I was focused on studying, but the noise repeated like someone was rummaging through a cabinet. My heart started to beat faster. I walked out of my room. It was dark outside, with only the light from my room shining out. Suddenly, the kitchen light turned on. I put my hand over my mouth to stifle a scream. After a few seconds of observation, I slowly moved toward the kitchen. As soon as I stepped out of the hallway, I saw a dark figure standing in front of the refrigerator. It was a tall man. His shoulders were broad, and he had a long scar on his left forearm. When he turned around, I was startled again to see his red face and scraggly beard. But there was something familiar about him when I looked a little closer. He came toward me aggressively. "Where's Nora?" Hearing Nora's name, I suddenly realized it was her boyfriend. But the person I had seen before was a brown-haired guy with a bright smile, completely different from the man in front of me. I tried to stay calm and said Nora had taken a leave of absence and wasn't here. He frowned, looking surprised. He didn't believe me and demanded that I tell him the truth. I repeated everything again, and I told him to leave immediately. He sneered and started pacing in the kitchen. He talked about how Nora had said she needed time to think and then completely disappeared, forcing him to look everywhere for her. As he said that, he suddenly shoved a chair and yelled, "Where is Nora?" His eyes were wide, and spit flew from his mouth as he screamed. He ran into the living room looking around for her. Then he ran to the bathroom door and opened it. Seeing no one, he ran to my bedroom door yelling, "Nora! I know you're in there!" I just stood there, my hands and feet numb as stone, my mind blank, unable to think. The scene in front of me was too crazy, and I lost all ability to react. The crazy guy didn't stop. He started smashing things when he couldn't find Nora. The sounds of breaking things echoed through the house like a nightmare. I couldn't stand there anymore. While he was distracted, I ran back to my room. I locked the door and, with trembling hands, called 911. I whispered to the dispatcher that there was a violent intruder, that I was alone, and that I was very scared. Before I could finish my sentence, a very loud banging on the door rang out. "Open the door! Nora's in there, isn't she?" I was startled and dropped my phone. The next second, I quickly grabbed my phone and begged the police to come as fast as they could. In that moment, I burst into tears, feeling desperate because I was facing a crazy person all by myself. After a few seconds of banging on the door, the sounds got louder and the door rattled violently. The crazy guy was using his shoulder to ram the door. He roared that he would find Nora no matter what. I huddled in the corner, covering my ears. After a few seconds, the door suddenly went silent. Then it turned to the next terrifying sound. He was repeatedly knocking on the lock. I panicked, realizing he was about to get in. My mind was blank, and I didn't know what to do except pray that the police would get there in time. The final clang rang out loudly, and the door flew open. He burst into the room, his red eyes scanning the place. "Where's Nora? Where are you hiding her?" He flipped the bed, pulled all the clothes out of the closet, and threw everything around the room. I huddled in the corner, not daring to move. "I'm asking you one more time, where's Nora?" he yelled in despair, continuing to smash things. My fear reached its peak. I was in a small room with a crazy person, and I felt like I was about to die from panic. I couldn't breathe and could only pray for it to end. Finally, police sirens blared loudly. He stopped smashing things. It took him a few seconds to process. Then he ran to the front door. The sounds of yelling and scuffling echoed in. A few minutes later, there was a soft knock on my door. "The intruder has been arrested. You can come out now," an officer announced. I shakily stepped out and saw the house was a war zone. He was taken away on charges of breaking and entering and making threats, and would be held for at least 48 hours. I couldn't sleep a single minute that night. The next day, I called Nora. When I told her what had happened, she was silent and then burst into tears. Nora apologized for putting me in danger. She never thought he would come all the way here. The truth was, Nora didn't actually take a leave of absence because of an illness. She left to get away from him. Nora told me about the terrifying months she had gone through. He had controlled her every move, manipulated her psychologically, and threatened violence every time Nora wanted to leave him. I thought leaving would end everything, but I never thought it would make him go crazy and act like that. I encouraged Nora a lot, telling her to come back to school because he had been arrested. He was sentenced to 1 year of probation and a 5-year restraining order against Nora. Nora agreed. Quinn also came back and was shocked to hear what had happened. We cleaned everything up together. In the following days, we replaced all the locks and installed a security camera system. 3 months later, sitting in the repaired house, I still jump every time I hear a strange noise. Nora is now back in school, stronger, and no longer having to face her dark past alone. We've grown closer after what happened, and realized that no matter how much darkness there is, as long as you have faith and support, you will always find the light to move forward. I never thought that installing security cameras would turn out to be the worst decision of my life. It all started when I moved into a small house on the outskirts of Salem, Oregon. My closest neighbor was almost half a mile away. It was just trees and an empty road all around. I felt I needed something to make me feel safer, so I decided to install cameras. I called the security company, and they scheduled a technician to come out that day. The installation went smoothly. The camera was mounted on the front door and connected to my phone. I felt more secure and adjusted to my new life pretty quickly. Except for the commute taking a bit of time, everything was fine. One day, I drove home after having too many drinks at my best friend's house, hoping to pass out on my own bed. I was shocked when I noticed the front door wasn't locked. There was no way I was that careless. Pushing the door open, the living room showed signs of a mess. It looked like someone had been rummaging through everything. As I went deeper into the house, I was horrified by the pitiful sight before me. I walked into the bedroom and my whole body went cold. The dresser drawers were open. My underwear was scattered across the bed. Someone had touched my things. I backed out of the room, trying to breathe steadily, and then I remembered the camera. I opened the app on my phone, but the screen showed a message that the memory card could not be found. I ran to the front door and looked up at the camera. The small slot for the memory card was empty. I panicked and quickly called my boyfriend, crying a lot. Jake told me to lock the door carefully and immediately drove over. We gathered the necessary things, and Jake took me to his place right away that night. After hearing my story, Jake was furious. Jake has a bit of a temper, but he's always calculating. He was a lifeguard for 7 years and has been training in martial arts since he was a kid. Jake said he would call the police, but that wasn't enough. Since this guy knew I lived alone, he had entered my house, and he might come back. Jake looked at me and said he had a plan. He's going to pay. Let him come back, but this time, I'll be waiting for him. The plan sounded crazy, but I completely agreed to follow Jake. He would wear my clothes, put on a wig, stay in the house, and wait. I would be in the car, a few hundred yards away, ready to call the police if anything happened. That evening, around 10 p.m., a tall, skinny man was walking from the side of my house. He moved slowly and seemed familiar with every corner. He opened the back door and disappeared inside the house. Everything that happened next was recounted to me by Jake, and I still get chills whenever I think about it. Jake was lying on the bed after disguising himself, covered with a blanket up to his waist. The room only had a dim nightlight. He heard light footsteps from the hallway. Then the bedroom door cracked open. The steps came closer. The breath of a man was warm on the back of his neck. Then the guy hugged Jake from behind. His hand kept stroking sensitive areas and whispering my name. But then he stopped abruptly when he reached down there. Then he continued to touch Jake's shoulder and bicep as if to confirm. Jake turned around in a flash, delivering a punch straight to his face. A loud scream, and the guy staggered back. Jake didn't stop. The continuous strikes didn't give him a chance to fight back, but also ensured no serious damage. A little while later, I got a call from Jake and ran into the house. Jake was holding him tight, with his hands twisted behind his back, face down on the floor. I turned on the lights, and what stunned me was him, the camera technician. He mumbled my name, looked at me with swollen eyes, and uttered a sickening sentence. "Ariana, there you are." I couldn't wait to enjoy all of your body myself. My boyfriend yelled, landed a powerful punch, and ordered him to shut up. I backed away, shaking badly, my hand dialing the police, but I couldn't take my eyes off him. He had been here from the start. From the day he installed the camera, he knew everything about me. At the police station, he confessed everything. His name was Ryan Cole, and he had worked for the security company for 2 years. There had been 5 other victims before me, all women living alone who called for camera installation services. They hadn't reported him because he kept the sensitive videos. He praised the police, saying I was the most beautiful and hottest of all his victims, his voice disturbingly calm. I sat in the waiting room, Jake holding me tight. I couldn't cry, I just felt empty. 3 weeks later, I moved in with Jake in Portland. His apartment is on the 3rd floor, with a security guard and public cameras. The neighbors are also very friendly. For the first few nights after the incident, I couldn't sleep. I remembered the day he came to install the camera. He asked me in a friendly voice if I lived alone, and I answered everything without being cautious. I had been too careless, without a second thought. Now, whenever a stranger asks me anything, I just smile and ignore them. Always be absolutely careful with everything, especially when you are a woman living alone. Sometimes your innocence and honesty are the very opening for predators to access you. I hope we can all stay safe. I started hearing strange sounds. At first, it was just a faint rustling sound coming from the living room late at night, like someone was rummaging through something. I jumped up, flipped on the light, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. I live in a 1-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor. There are no fire escapes near the windows, and the main door was securely locked. There was no way a stranger could break in. I told myself I was just overly stressed from binging 3 horror movies. Maybe my imagination was acting up. The next morning, I looked for my mug to make coffee but found it in the sink. I didn't remember when I had used it, or why I hadn't washed it right away. Next, the notebook on my desk was opened. But I was currently on vacation. I hadn't done any work all week. These small things started adding up. I double-checked the door locks and window latches carefully before going to bed. The next morning, some items still showed signs of being moved. I even noticed that the kitchen area had been used. That evening, I decided to try a different approach. I deliberately arranged some things in a different order. After using the mug, I would put it in a drawer instead of on the dish rack. Items in the bathroom were also rearranged after the last time I went in that day. And sure enough, they had been moved by the next morning. At that point, I was certain someone had broken into the apartment. But I didn't have enough evidence to call the police. These small signs weren't enough proof. I hadn't lost any valuable items either. I needed to collect more evidence, so I bought 2 mini cameras. I set one up near the front door and aimed the other at the window. Those were the only 2 places someone could break in. That night, I kept the camera app open on my phone all night to monitor. Nothing unusual happened. I dozed off a few times and then woke up with a start. Repeating that all night left me completely exhausted. The next morning, everything was still messed up. I rushed to check the camera footage, but there was still nothing. A chill ran down my spine. Something was playing games with me, and it knew exactly how to avoid being seen. For 3 nights in a row, I didn't get a full night's sleep. Every time I managed to drift off, I would be startled awake by vague sounds. A very faint tap, a chair creaking, or the feeling that someone had just brushed past my bed. I sat bolt upright in the middle of the night many times. In the morning, my eyes were burning, my head was throbbing, and I could feel my heart pounding hard. By the 5th day, I started doubting myself. Was I doing these things in my sleep? Maybe I was too tired and my brain was starting to conjure up things that weren't real. I searched online for symptoms of sleep disorders. One article mentioned that sleepwalking often happens when a person is under prolonged stress. Then, the next night, I woke up to the sound of footsteps. They were very clear, slow, moving from the living room toward the hallway. My heart hammered like a drum, and sweat began to trickle down. I lay motionless, not daring to breathe loudly or turn on the light. Something was in my apartment, but I was too tired and scared to act. I burrowed deep under my covers, my hands trembling, trying to whisper the prayer my mother used to teach me. Then the footsteps stopped right outside my bedroom door. I squeezed my eyes shut, waiting. Nothing happened. And then, when I opened my eyes again, the sky outside the window was bright. I sat up and looked around the room. Nothing seemed out of place, but I was still terrified. I called out of work that day, sitting on my bed and staring at the bedroom door. Every sound made me jump. That night, I saw it. A dark shadow standing in the corner of the living room. It wasn't the shadow of furniture or an illusion from the streetlights. It stood tall and straight, and it was looking toward me. The shadow began to move, slow steps advancing toward me. My brain kept repeating that this was a nightmare. My throat felt constricted, and my limbs were numb. But every sound and image I was experiencing felt completely real. The shadow moved closer. Then it stepped out of the darkness, and I saw a man's face. He was wearing a uniform I had seen before. He stretched out his hand. When he touched my shoulder, it was like an electric shock that snapped me fully awake. I screamed, pushed him backward, and lunged into the kitchen. My hand grabbed a kitchen knife, and I spun around, swinging it toward him. He rushed forward, grabbed my hair, and yanked it back. I swung the knife repeatedly. Then he let out a roar and let go of me. I ran into the hallway, screaming at the top of my lungs for help. The person in the apartment across the hall let me hide and called the police. The police arrived. A while later, they dragged him out of my apartment, and my neighbor took me outside. The police said they had pulled him out of the closet in the living room. I was stunned when I looked at him. He was gaunt, his hair was messy, and his eyes were deeply sunken. I looked closely at the crumpled brown uniform, and I suddenly remembered he was one of the two delivery men. Earlier in the week, I had ordered a desk on Craigslist. He was the one who had asked to use the bathroom that day. I was busy dealing with some work, and by the time I came back out, both men had disappeared. So he had never actually left. I nearly collapsed thinking about the fact that I had been living with him for almost a week. A feeling of absolute dread washed over me. I had even thought I was losing my mind. I felt both terrified and angry at myself. I hadn't realized it sooner. Something I thought only happened in movies was actually happening to me, and I couldn't blame anyone but myself for being too careless. After the incident, I moved to a different apartment. I installed extra locks, bought an alarm, and never let a stranger step inside my home, not even for a few minutes. I learned one thing. Sometimes the scariest thing isn't what we can't see, but what we have seen and failed to pay attention to. A few years ago, right after I turned 18, my family, including my parents, my 11-year-old brother Evan, and me, decided to have a different kind of Christmas holiday. We left the suburbs of Ontario to visit a forest area, renting a set of hunting cabins. We set off around 2 p.m. on Christmas Day. My mother wanted a rustic, nature-centric Christmas experience. We brought along our German Shepherd Ranger. He's a gentle but extremely protective dog, especially of Evan. We arrived at the cabin area around 4 p.m. It was a small cluster of cabins scattered throughout the woods. The weather was already freezing, and snow had begun to fall. We quickly moved our belongings into the cabin and started enjoying Christmas Eve by playing games together. My dad had prepared his hunting rifle in a bag, placing it under the bed where I would be sleeping. He usually keeps the gun locked in a case, but since we planned to go hunting the next morning, he left it there. Around 10 p.m., Evan and I were tired and decided to go to bed. Our room was at the end of the cabin, facing a river. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to Ranger's low growling. Initially, I didn't find it strange because my dad often suffered from insomnia and would sit in the living room watching TV, and Ranger would usually growl at any minor noise. However, this time I noticed no light was cast from under my door. My dad never sat in the dark. I whispered to Ranger to be quiet so Evan could sleep, but the growling quickly turned into barking, waking Evan up. Just then, our bedroom door suddenly flew open and the light snapped on. My eyes were dazzled, and when I adjusted, I saw my dad standing in the doorway, eyes wide and face pale. He asked, "Were you two laughing?" I replied, "No." He walked over, pulled open our bedroom curtains, stared into the darkness outside for a moment, and then closed the curtains. He simply said, "It's nothing. Go back to sleep." He turned off the light and left. I found my dad's behavior eerie and couldn't fall back asleep. I started at almost every sound for the rest of the night. Around 4 a.m., just as I was dozing off, I heard a strange sound outside the window. It was the distinct crunch of footsteps, not the sounds of an animal. I felt an extreme fear and pulled the blanket over my head. Then, I heard a light tapping on the window, which lasted for a few seconds. Ranger was awake now too. He turned his face toward the window, ears pointed straight out, listening intently. The tapping returned, louder than before, making Ranger bare his teeth and growl. Then, the scariest thing happened. A low, hoarse voice whispered, "I know you're in there, little one," followed by a chilling invitation. "Why don't you come out and play with me?" Initially, I thought it was someone from a neighboring cabin playing a joke, maybe a group of teens also on holiday. I leaned forward and slightly parted the curtain to look out. ready to give them a piece of my mind for scaring us. But the person standing outside was far from normal. Under the dim light from the cabin's porch lamp, I saw an older man wearing a shaggy blue costume, exactly like the Grinch, the Christmas-stealing goblin from the movie. The lower half of his face was covered by a mask, but his eyes darted back and forth and his matted hair were enough to send a chill down my spine. His filthy hand was stroking the window pane as he whispered and gasped for breath. Anger replaced fear, and I immediately switched to protective mode. I grabbed my dad's hunting rifle from under the bed, pulled the curtains shut, and yelled, "Get lost, or I'll shoot!" The old man's eyes widened, and a horrible smile appeared on his face. Ranger started barking louder than ever. He was ready to attack at any moment. My parents heard the commotion and quickly rushed into the room, turning on the light. My mom screamed when she saw the old man through the window, while my dad yelled at him, telling him the police were on their way. In those few chaotic seconds, I noticed his blue furry costume was torn in places and covered in snow. He stood there for a few seconds, his eyes manic, then turned and bolted into the woods. Evan was terrified. He remained silent, a look of panic etched on his face throughout. In that moment, all I felt was anger and immense gratitude that I had the gun. The police caught the old man a few minutes later. A few days later, I learned that he was a homeless man living in the woods and suffering from mental health issues. The Grinch costume was found in his backpack, along with some old toys and a small knife. This terrified me when I thought about what could have happened to Evan if I hadn't been there. That night, we didn't dare to sleep in our cabin anymore and requested to move to an empty one nearby, closer to the management office. Only much later did my dad reveal the truth. He said he knew someone was lurking around our cabin, so he deliberately left the rifle under my bed in case I needed to defend myself, but he didn't want to scare us. My dad had called the police after hearing the man laugh and sing a creepy nursery rhyme, then growl a fake Grinch voice right outside his own bedroom window. That was the last Christmas my family spent in the woods. It took a very long time for Evan to sleep well on winter nights, and I still checked the windows carefully before going to bed. And I will never forget the manic look in the eyes of the man in the Grinch costume that day. I'm writing this from room 314 at Lima State Hospital in Ohio. They say I'm delusional, but I know what I went through was real. My name is Ellie. I'm 26. 3 months ago, I was a waitress at a diner. I rented a small apartment on Oak Street near Riverside Park. Everything was quiet until he showed up. The first time I noticed him was when he came in as a customer at the diner. He was tall, thin, and around 30 years old. Always wore a white shirt and khakis. He would just sit there and watch me while I worked. I tried to ignore it, but he came back every single day, always at the same time and in the same booth. He would always stare at me with unblinking eyes. I started to feel uneasy. After 2 weeks, the messages started appearing. First, it was a small piece of paper tucked under my car's rearview mirror. The handwriting was neat. "The blue sweater looks good on you." I had worn a navy blue sweater that day. It could just be a coincidence. I threw the note away. The second message appeared, taped to my bedroom window. "Your pink socks are very cute." I looked down at the socks on my feet and shuddered. I called the police, but what I reported wasn't convincing enough. The police promised to patrol the area more often. I started becoming sensitive to every single noise. I installed extra locks and kept the curtains tightly drawn. Things gradually escalated. One evening I got home after a late shift and found my trash can had been knocked over in front of my door. Garbage was scattered all over the hallway. I just had to clean everything up in frustration. I didn't dare stay home alone anymore. I asked Tom, my friendly neighbor, for help. Tom was handsome and lived alone in the apartment across the hall. "Ellie, you should call the police," Tom said when I told him everything. I was grateful for Tom. He was the only person who believed me. The next day, when I opened my door, a dead sparrow was lying right on the doormat. Next to the bird's body was a piece of paper with the words, "You can't escape." I quickly backed into the apartment, shakily locked the door, and then sank to the floor. That evening, I woke up to a noise from the kitchen. It sounded like someone was opening the refrigerator. My heart started to pound. I grabbed my handgun and crept down the hallway. There was a shadow moving in the kitchen. "I have a gun!" I shouted, my voice trembling. The shadow stopped. Then it slowly turned around. It was him again. He stood in my kitchen, holding a bottle of water and smiling at me. "Hello, Ellie." I hated that face, furious at that gentle, casual, yet haunting attitude. I pointed the gun straight at him decisively. "Shut up!" Right after my shout came the deafening sound of the gunshot. He fell. Blood spread across the kitchen floor. I stood there gasping, staring at the motionless body for a few minutes. When I realized the situation, I trembled as I reached for the light switch. I screamed with all my strength at the sight before me. The person lying there was not him, it was Tom. Blood was pouring non-stop from his chest. Tom's eyes looked at me with surprise and pain. "Ellie, I heard a noise. Thought someone." Tom gasped. I knelt beside him, my hands shaking as I pressed down on the wound. "Tom, I'm sorry. I didn't know," I thought. Tom tried to say something, but blood filled his mouth. Then his eyes slowly glazed over. I called an ambulance, but it was too late. Tom died from massive blood loss. The police arrived. They found no signs of forced entry. I told them about the stalker, the messages, and everything I had endured recently. But when the police checked, their answer was still that they found no evidence. Stress can make people do things they don't realize. You might have written those letters yourself during a period of high anxiety without knowing it. The psychiatrist told me, "No, I'm not crazy. He was real. He was in my kitchen," I yelled. But no one believed me. The only person who believed me was the one I had killed. I was taken to Lima State Hospital. They gave me medicine, made me participate in therapy sessions. They said I would get better if I accepted the truth. Last night, I looked out the window of my room and saw him standing in the yard. The same white shirt, the same khakis. He looked up and smiled. I called the nurse, but when they looked outside, there was nothing there. "You're having delusions again, Ellie. Take your medicine and rest," the nurse said. "But I know he's still out there." I never thought that a pair of underwear could be the scariest thing I'd ever seen in my life. I'm Alex. At the time, I was 17 years old, a normal kid who liked playing basketball and spending time with my girlfriend. Her name was Sarah. She was my age and lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood in California. We had met at the beginning of our senior year of high school, and our relationship was only a few months old. That night, Sarah texted me and invited me over because her parents were away on a weekend trip. I was excited, and I drove my dad's car there without a second thought. I parked in front of Sarah's house and checked my phone for messages. I had texted Sarah that I was on my way, but she hadn't replied. Maybe she's getting ready inside, I thought. I straightened myself up a bit and walked toward the front door. The living room window was slightly ajar. I was about to knock on the door, but then I stopped when I saw a figure moving in the living room. It was a man, tall, wearing a dark jacket. Sarah had said it was just going to be the two of us. I didn't rush to knock on the door, and instead observed a little more. He was walking slowly, looking around as if he was searching for something. My heart beat a little faster. I squinted to get a better look through the glass. He was wearing a green hood, which covered most of his face. But then, when he turned around, the light shone on him more clearly, and I realized something terrifying. It wasn't a normal hood, but a pair of women's underwear he was wearing on his head like a mask, with two hastily cut eye holes. The bottom half of his face was still exposed. His mouth and chin were covered in stubble. Panic washed over me. I couldn't think anymore. My first instinct was to run. I turned and rushed toward my car, almost tripping on the stone walkway. Then I remembered my girlfriend. Where's Sarah? Is she okay? I jumped into my car, locked the doors, and reached for my phone to call 911. My voice was stammering as I told the operator, "Someone broke into my girlfriend's house. He's wearing underwear on his head. Please come quickly." The operator said they would have police officers there right away and told me not to do anything dangerous. But my concern for Sarah grew stronger. My girlfriend was so beautiful. I couldn't leave her alone with him. Even though my hands and feet were numb with fear, I decided to go back. I quietly approached the front door. Hidden behind a low bush to the left of the door, I took a deep breath and yelled as loud as I could, "The police are coming! You can't get away!" I immediately crouched down and hid in the bush. From inside the house, there was a loud noise, things breaking, and the sound of footsteps running. Then the front door burst open, and I was stunned to see not one, but two guys rush out. Both of them were wearing underwear on their heads, as masks. One was wearing a green jacket, and the other was wearing a black one. They ran toward the backyard, but they tripped on the lawn and dropped a few things from their bags. I stayed hidden in the bush, not daring to breathe loudly. Then police sirens blared from a distance, and red and blue lights flashed on the street. 2 patrol cars stopped in front of the house, and 4 police officers jumped out, their guns ready. The 2 thieves who were trying to run through the backyard panicked even more when they heard the yelling, but the police quickly caught up to them, tackled them to the ground, and handcuffed them. It was crazy that the guy in the black jacket even mumbled a request to keep the underwear on his head. I came out and told the police everything. Then I went inside with an officer to look for Sarah. She was tied tightly to a chair in the upstairs bedroom, her mouth covered with duct tape. The closet had been ransacked, and clothes and underwear were scattered all over the floor. Luckily, Sarah was not hurt, but her eyes were filled with a soulless, panicked look. After a few days of investigation, the case was reported in the news and quickly spread because of the 2 robbers' bizarre behavior. The police said they were brothers and had committed several burglaries in the area. The underwear on their heads was how they covered their faces to avoid the cameras. A bizarre act that even the police found hard to understand. They were arrested and sentenced to prison. But for Sarah, the fear didn't just go away. In the days that followed, she started having nightmares, jumped at every small noise, and was afraid to be home alone. It's been almost 6 years since the incident. Sarah's mental health is better after going through therapy. We are now engaged and will be by each other's side for every moment of our lives together. This happened a few years ago, just a few days before Halloween. I had just gotten off work and was looking forward to the long weekend. I planned to stay up late and have a chill night. On the way home, I grabbed some fast food and then settled onto the sofa to eat and watch Netflix. About 30 minutes into my show, I paused it to throw away the leftovers. When I walked into the kitchen and tossed the trash, I happened to glance out the back window and saw a man standing in my backyard. This was really weird because my yard is small but completely fenced in, so it wasn't like he just wandered in by accident from a shortcut. I flipped on the porch light and slid open the glass door. "Hey, what are you doing out here?" I yelled at him. Under the light, I could see his face more clearly. He was a young guy, probably in his early 20s, with these tired, almost frightening eyes. He didn't answer me, so I called out again. "You need to leave right now. This is my backyard." He just glanced at me and then casually walked toward the gate. I watched to make sure he was gone. After he disappeared, I was still confused about what had just happened. It was so bizarre. I even went out into the backyard and stood where he had been, looking up at my house to see if anything had caught his eye, but there was nothing. I went back inside and tried to shake it off. I didn't know what else to do. I poured myself a glass of water, got back on the couch, and continued my show. I finished that episode and had just started the next one. Maybe 20 minutes had passed when I heard footsteps running in my backyard. Before I could even react, a loud thump hit the door, rattling the whole frame. I jumped up and ran to the kitchen. My legs froze when I saw the sight in front of me. It was the same man from earlier. He was now pressed against my back door. He was pushing his whole body into the glass door, his shoulders and chest tight against the surface. His hands were gripping the handle, yanking on it like he was trying to pull it off. I stood there, stunned, seeing his face just inches away on the other side of the thin glass. His eyes weren't tired anymore. They were wide, staring right at me with a wild and aggressive look. His mouth was open, and he was trying to speak, but only guttural, garbled sounds came out. I quickly grabbed the inside handle with both hands. He kept yanking, and with each tug, the whole door shook. I could hear the metal groaning and the screws loosening bit by bit. "Open the door!" he screamed. "I'm running out of patience!" My hands were shaking. I couldn't tear my eyes away from his contorted face. I took a step back, trying to keep my balance. "Get out of my house! Leave right now!" I yelled back. He didn't respond with words, but with a massive shoulder check to the door. The whole frame shuddered. I flinched and stumbled backward, almost tripping. My hands trembled as I pulled out my phone to call 911, my eyes still glued to the crazed man. Cold sweat ran down my back. I held the phone, listening to it ring, while in front of me, he kept trying to break in. He pushed, pulled, and slammed against the door with increasing force. Then, he suddenly stopped. In the silence, I could hear my own ragged breathing. He stood still pressed against the glass, staring at me. His eyes still held that insane look. "You can't hide forever," he said in a chilling voice. Then he smiled, which sent a shiver down my spine. After that, he turned and went back towards the gate, but this time he didn't leave. I heard footsteps moving around the side of the house. Not being able to see him was even more terrifying than when he was right in front of me. I paced between windows, trying to keep track of where he was. I just kept praying he wouldn't try anything else. Every little noise made me jump. About 5 minutes passed in this tense state. Then, a police car showed up. I saw the flashing red and blue lights through my living room window. Immediately, I heard footsteps running from the side of the house, but they weren't running away. They were running toward the back door. He reappeared at the door and started trying to break it down again. This time, he was even more violent, repeatedly headbutting the glass and using his shoulder to ram it. I could hear him growling. The crazy thing was that he chose to try to break in again instead of trying to escape. The police quickly caught him in the act. After a short struggle, they cuffed him, put him in the car, and left. 2 officers stayed behind to get my statement and check on the house. Luckily, he didn't break anything. The next morning, I got a call from the police with the results of his interrogation. The man, whose name was Melvin, was apparently heavily under the influence of some kind of stimulant during the incident. This was later confirmed by tests. Even after being questioned all night and a few more times when he was sober, Melvin never gave a real reason for his actions. The only good thing for me was that he wasn't armed with any weapons. From what I know, he was only jailed for a few weeks because he was not in his right mind during the crime, and that always leaves me worried that he might come back. I'm Chasey. I'm the oldest of 3 siblings, and my little sister Lauren is 8. This is the unforgettable story of me and my sister's crazy and scary Christmas Eve last year. My family wasn't like those TV families with a Christmas tree loaded with presents or a cozy dinner by the fire. My dad worked hard, but we were still struggling with money. My mom, who was really my stepmom, drank a lot and barely cared about us. That Christmas Eve, my dad drove 3 hours to work. My stepmom got drunk and passed out in the afternoon, leaving us to take care of ourselves. I still wanted to make a good memory for Lauren. I'd saved up some money from my part-time job to buy Lauren a little gift, a dog keychain she really liked. When I gave her the gift, Lauren's eyes lit up, and her big smile made me feel like all the effort was totally worth it. Lauren surprised me even more. She gave me a handmade card with a thank you note and cute little drawings. A weird, warm feeling spread through my heart. We sat next to each other, all curled up in a big blanket, eating popcorn and watching Christmas shows on the old TV. Everything felt calm and happy. But then, there was a sudden knock at the door. Lauren jumped up and yelled, "It's gotta be Dad!" and ran toward the door without thinking, but I quickly pulled her back. Before he left, Dad had told me real seriously, "Don't open the door to anyone, especially on Christmas Eve. That's when bad guys can take advantage of things." Lauren still wouldn't listen and kept trying to run to the door. She looked through the peephole and shouted, "It's Santa Claus!" "Chasey, open the door!" But I felt a sense of unease rising in my heart. I looked through the peephole and saw a guy in a red suit and a Santa hat. But the look in his eyes was nothing like I'd imagine a nice Santa would have. His cold stare at the door made my skin crawl. I pulled Lauren away from the door, trying to sound firm. "You can't open the door. That's not Dad, and it's definitely not Santa." The guy outside started using a sweet voice, saying he just wanted to give us presents. But I wasn't fooled. I yelled through the door, telling him to leave. Instead of giving up, he got even more patient. The knocking got louder, more regular, and kept going. He pulled some stuff out of his pocket and started messing with the lock. My heart was pounding, and Lauren was shaking as she clung to me. I pulled Lauren over to the landline to call my dad, but the phone was dead, and my sisters and I just got more and more freaked out. At this point, I decided to call 911, but the operator didn't believe me and thought we were just messing around. I felt totally helpless and hopeless. Meanwhile, Lauren ran upstairs to wake up her stepmom, but nothing could get her to wake up. Lauren ran back down, hugged me, and then just broke down in tears. Outside, the sound of the door being broken down kept getting louder, and the creepy guy's laugh sounded like he was enjoying watching my sisters and me freak out. I had to come up with a way to fix this situation. I looked around the living room and stopped when I saw the smoke alarm on the ceiling. An idea popped into my head. I decided to create an emergency so the fire department would come and help us. I grabbed a roll of tissue, lit a small candle, and held it up to the smoke alarm. The fire alarm went off loud, and about 10 minutes later, I heard the fire truck siren. We sighed in relief when we saw the headlights shining through the window. But what was even crazier was the guy outside the door suddenly yelling really loud. He said he was our dad, pretending to be Santa Claus, but got stuck outside. His voice came through urgently, asking the firefighters to break down the door. The fear that hadn't completely gone away hit me even harder. My hands were freezing, but the worry about my sister's safety and mine made me feel stronger than ever. I knew that right then, I had to act fast. I remembered the family photo hanging on the wall in the living room. I quickly grabbed the photo, ran out, and cracked the door open, holding it up with shaky hands. I told the firefighters everything that happened. The guy outside wasn't my dad. He was a scammer who'd tricked us and was trying to break down the door. When the firefighters gave him suspicious looks, the creep immediately turned to run but got held back. The police were called right away, and the guy was quickly restrained. Once the situation was settled, the firefighters called my dad's work to let him know about the emergency. My dad came straight home that night. When he found out what happened, he was really mad. He and my stepmom got into a huge argument and then decided to get a divorce. My dad said that me and my sisters were the most important things in the world. My dad also switched jobs so he could spend more time taking care of us. That Christmas Eve was super scary, but it also made me realize how much power and responsibility I have as the oldest sister. And most importantly, It brought a change to my family, a new start to a better life, one without fear or lack of love. I clearly remember it was a rainy night in June. The sound of rain tapping steadily on the roof created a rhythmic sound. The kind of weather that makes you just want to curl up in a warm blanket and text the person you like. That's exactly what I was doing, surrounded by pillows, immersed in darkness, lit only by the faint blue glow from my phone's screen. Her name was Jenny, and I was Victor, a 15-year-old high school student. Jenny was beautiful with long blonde hair and a smile that could light up a dark room. She was in my science class at Westlake High School. It took me 2 months to muster the courage to ask for her Snapchat, and we started texting every night, which became a routine. I had waited for an hour when Jenny texted me saying she was alone because her parents had taken her younger brother to the doctor for an emergency fever. A Snapchat notification popped up. I quickly unlocked my phone. It was a selfie from Jenny. She was smiling, wearing a purple hoodie, with her hair falling down to her shoulders. Her bedroom was dark, lit only by a small nightlight on the bedside table. A message came with the photo. "I'm pretty tired, but I don't want to sleep yet. Tell me something fun." I smiled and started typing my reply. But then I stopped. Something felt off. I looked at the photo again carefully, and I noticed the window in her bedroom in the background, reflecting the dim light from the nightlight. And when I zoomed in on the picture, my heart almost stopped. There was a face in the window. At first, I thought it was just an illusion caused by the light and shadows. So I sat up, turned the screen brightness all the way up, and looked again. My heart suddenly raced as I realized that it was definitely the face of a man. Although the image was blurry, I could still see his eyes staring directly at Jenny. My hands began to shake. The phone nearly slipped from my hands. I could hear my heart pounding in my chest. "Jenny, someone is outside your window," I typed as quickly as I could. I waited for a few seconds. No response. I typed again, this time with more exclamation marks, as though that would make my message arrive faster. "Jenny, someone is watching you through the window. Call your parents now." 3 minutes passed, no response. Should I call the police? But what would I say? We had just met at school. I knew she lived in Oak Ridge, but I didn't know her exact address. My phone buzzed. Jenny was calling me on video. My hands shook so much I could barely swipe to answer. When I did, I saw Jenny's face appear on the screen, pale and tear-streaked. "Victor, there's someone trying to get into my room," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Call your parents." "I've called them. They're on their way." Then I heard it, the scratching sound on the glass. Not from the window in my room, but from Jenny's side. I could see the terror on her face. It's trying to open the window," Jenny whispered, her voice so quiet I could barely hear. I didn't know what to do. A sense of helplessness washed over me. I was here, safe in my room, while Jenny, the girl I liked, was facing a real nightmare. "Can you run out of the room or lock the door?" "I can't move." The scratching continued. Then a new sound, the sound of metal. He was trying to open the window from the outside. Jenny turned the camera toward the window, and there was a shadowy figure outside, faint behind the glass. A hand was pushing. The window was slowly opening. "Jenny, run! Run now!" I yelled, tears starting to stream down my face. The camera shook violently. As Jenny got up, I heard the sound of hurried, heavy footsteps as she ran through the room. The sound of the door opening, the heavy breathing. She was running down the hallway. "I'm running downstairs. Victor, if anything happens." "No, nothing's going to happen. Your dad's almost home, right? Just hide. Go to the kitchen and find a knife to protect yourself." The camera continued to shake as Jenny ran down the stairs. I caught a brief glimpse of the dark living room, then the kitchen. Victor, I think I hear footsteps on the stairs. Jenny, hide. Hide now. I'm in the kitchen cupboard under the sink. Your dad will be home soon. Just hide and stay quiet. For a moment, we just sat there in silence. I could hear Jenny's breath, tight and labored. Part of me still couldn't believe this was happening. Just 10 minutes ago, we were texting like normal, sharing stories about the day at school. Now, I was watching extreme fear unfold before my eyes, and I couldn't do anything to help. Then I heard it through the phone, the slow steps coming into the kitchen. The footsteps stopped. I could hear Jenny's breath becoming more frantic.
Jenny Miller.
A voice spoke up, making both me and Jenny jump.
I know where you are. Why don't we talk?
Jenny put her hand over her mouth to stop her breathing. I could see her tears in the dim light from the phone screen.
I've been watching you for a long time, Jenny. On Snapchat, you never noticed that my account was always there, following every one of your posts. I know you like purple. I know you hate broccoli. I know you sleep with a moon-shaped nightlight.
I felt sick. How long had this person been watching her?
And I know you're talking to that kid, Victor. He's not worth your time, Jenny. He's just a little boy. You need a real man.
My heart stopped when I heard my name. How did he know about me? The footsteps started again, walking around the kitchen.
You can't hide forever, Jenny. I've seen all the videos of your house you posted on Snapchat. I know every corner of this house, and I especially know about the cupboard under the sink where you're hiding. Come out, Jenny, or I'll break this door down. 1, 2.
The front door opened, cutting off the intruders counting. Jenny! I heard the sound of hurried footsteps leaving the kitchen, the door opening and slamming shut.
Dad!
Jenny screamed, pushing open the cupboard door. The camera shook as she ran toward the front door. Through the blurry screen, I saw Mr. Miller tightly hug Jenny. She was sobbing in his arms. Are you okay? What happened? Dad, there was a man. He climbed into my window. He was chasing me. We should call the police. The police arrived, took Jenny's statement, and checked the house. They found marks on the bedroom window showing that someone had tried to open it from the outside. They also found footprints in the garden beneath Jenny's window, but no traces of the intruder inside the house. It seemed like he had fled when Mr. Miller arrived. Jenny showed the police the Snapchat photo, but it was too blurry, not enough to become a lead in the investigation. 3 months have passed since that night. Jenny transferred schools because her parents didn't feel safe at Westlake anymore. We still kept in touch, but we didn't text every night like before. There was a fear that had changed between us. The police never found the intruder. No security cameras in the area captured his image. The footprints didn't match any criminal records in their database. Sometimes, when I lie in bed at night, looking at the darkness outside my window, I wonder if he's still watching me. And the worst part is, I can't stop thinking about how he knew my name, how he knew Jenny, and I were texting each other. He had been following all of her social media accounts and probably mine too. Since that night, I've made all my social media accounts private. I no longer post selfies, always make sure the curtains are drawn tightly at night, and I always feel like someone is watching me. I'm Naomi, 15 years old. That evening was a Saturday night. My parents were out at a friend's birthday party and wouldn't be back until late. I was sitting on the sofa in the living room, watching a comedy. Abby, our 7-year-old dog, was curled up beside my feet. Everything was peaceful until 9 o'clock. I heard a noise from outside. Abby heard it too and lifted her head. I muted the TV and listened. It was just the sound of the wind blowing through the branches of the maple tree outside. I was about to turn the sound back on when Abby suddenly jumped up. Her ears stood up and she stared toward the front door. I turned off the TV completely and everything went silent. The sound of slow footsteps came clearly through the stillness. Someone was walking from the driveway, across the front yard, then toward the side of the house. I stood up, my legs shaking. Looking through the living room window, I saw the front yard lit up by the lights. There was no one out there, but the footsteps continued, now coming from the back of the house. Abby walked toward the front door, her fur standing on end. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. Maybe it's just a neighbor walking their dog. But why would he walk into my yard? The footsteps stopped somewhere behind the house. I waited, counting my heartbeat. A moment later, I heard the sound of metal clinking. Abby started growling. It definitely wasn't the neighbor, like I had thought. Abby never reacts like this to familiar people. I quietly moved to the kitchen, where there was a small window above the sink facing the backyard. Everything was dark. The sound of metal came again. This time it was clearer. Someone was messing with the back door lock. I moved closer to the wall and slowly peered through the corner of the window. The motion sensor light in the backyard suddenly turned on, bright as day. I saw the back of a tall man in a black coat, wearing a knitted hat covering his face. He was holding a long metal bar, trying to pry open the back door lock. I froze, stunned. He was a burglar, or worse. I backed away, leaning against the refrigerator. My hands were trembling. I needed to call 911 right away, but I couldn't find my phone. I put my hands on my head, trying to remember where I had left it. The sound of metal scraping against the lock continued. He seemed to be getting impatient. Abby ran into the kitchen, looking up at me, still growling toward the back door. I hugged Abby's neck, whispering, "Shh, Abby, don't make a sound." But Abby wouldn't listen, her growling getting louder. The scraping noise immediately stopped. I held my breath. He knew someone was inside. A few seconds passed, and I heard heavy footsteps on the wooden stairs at the back of the house. He was walking down to the backyard, leaving the back door, but I knew he wasn't leaving. The footsteps moved from the backyard to the side of the house. He was walking around checking other entrances. I heard him try pushing against the window frame. It was locked, but he was still trying. Then he moved to the living room window. Abby barked sharply. I rushed to cover her mouth, but it was too late. The footsteps stopped at the living room window. I imagined he was standing out there, staring through the glass, knowing for sure someone was home. My heart pounded harder and harder. I had to do something. Then suddenly, I remembered my dad's gun. He keeps it in the closet in their bedroom. The footsteps started again. Now he was in front of the house. I didn't have much time to hesitate. I picked up Abby and ran down the hall to my parents' bedroom and opened the closet. I felt a little safer. My dad's old shoebox was at the bottom of the closet. I opened it. Inside was a small handgun next to a box of bullets. I picked it up and checked the magazine like I had seen my dad do. 6 rounds, all there. I took the safety off, my hands still shaking. Abby was standing by the door, looking toward the stairs with her ears perked up. The scraping from the basement started again. The basement door was old, and the lock wasn't very secure. If he kept at it, he could open it. Abby ran toward the basement stairs, barking loudly. Her barking echoed through the house like an alarm system. The scraping from the basement grew louder. I looked at the gun in my hand. If he came in, if he meant to hurt me, would I be able to pull the trigger? The scraping stopped. Abby stopped barking but was still growling. I listened. There were no footsteps from the basement. He hadn't entered the house. Instead, I heard heavy footsteps moving outside, climbing the concrete steps leading from the basement door to the yard. He had given up. I collapsed onto the bedroom floor, leaning against the bed. Abby ran up to me, licking my face. I held her tightly, feeling her warmth. Now, I needed to call the police. The phone had to be somewhere under the living room couch. I ran downstairs and found it in the corner of the sofa. but before I pressed the call button, I heard a car engine from far away. The headlights shone through the living room window. The car was turning into our driveway. My parents were home. I still didn't dare open the door to run outside. I just stood still, listening. But Abby had noticed, her tail wagging furiously. My parents stepped into the house through the garage door, talking about the party. "Sarah, are you asleep?" my mom called. I ran to them, still holding the gun in my hand. When my parents saw me like that, their smiles immediately disappeared. "Sweetheart, what's going on?" my dad asked, quickly taking the gun from my hand. I told them everything, my voice shaking. My dad turned on the back porch light and grabbed a flashlight to check around the house. We called the police. 2 officers arrived, took my statement, and checked the house. The basement door and the back door showed signs of tampering. It was likely that someone was testing out which house was easy to break into. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed with Abby curled up next to me, listening to every sound outside. The next morning, I went down to the kitchen and overheard a conversation between Uncle Peter and my dad on the phone. "Jack, I stopped by your place last night, but no one answered the door." My dad was silent for a while. "Did you do anything there, Peter?" "Well, I just wanted to leave a thank you card and a gift card for Sarah. She helped me with my presentation last week and I just got promoted." "Did you try any of the doors?" "No, I just left the card and left." My dad and I looked at each other in silence. So the first footsteps were from Uncle Pete, and the one who tried to pry open the lock and walk around my house came later. I shuddered as I realized, if Uncle Pete hadn't come first, I might not have been alert in time. It's chilling to think about.